In just a few weeks, I'll be marrying the love of my life, Lucas. It should be the happiest time of my life. But there's a problem I can't ignore. His sister, Bianca, has been a thorn in my side since the day we met. And now, Lucas expects me to pretend everything is fine, to embrace her as family, and to participate in gatherings with her after we're married. For years, I managed to avoid unnecessary interaction with her. I made polite small talk when needed, nodded along during family events, and kept my distance. Lucas knew this and at one point even agreed that I didn't have to deal with her. But something changed. Now that we're getting married, he's pushing for me to forgive and forget. I already compromised once. Bianca is coming to our wedding, despite my deep discomfort. That should be enough, right? Apparently not. Lucas thinks I need to go further, fully integrating into his family, meaning Bianca included. But how do you integrate with someone who has made it clear they don't respect you? Someone who has humiliated you, excluded you, and treated you like an outsider? I don't think I can do it. I don't think I should have to. Lucas insists that family is complicated and that Bianca is difficult with everyone, not just me. He swears she doesn't hate me. She's just like that. That phrase alone makes my blood boil. Like that doesn't justify how she's treated me. I love Lucas. I want to spend my life with him. But I also want peace, and Bianca represents the exact opposite of that. The wedding is approaching fast, but instead of being excited, I feel anxious, because I know this fight isn't over. The first time I met Bianca, I wanted to make a good impression. Lucas had told me she could be a bit blunt, but I assumed that just meant she was straightforward. I was wrong. It was a casual dinner at their parents' house. As soon as I walked in, Bianca gave me a once-over and smirked. "You're really going with that outfit?" she said, barely trying to hide her amusement. I laughed it off, thinking maybe it was her way of joking. But as the evening went on, I realized she wasn't joking, she was testing me. Every comment she made had an edge to it. She criticized the way I spoke, implying I sounded too formal and not fun. She made backhanded compliments about my job, saying it must be nice to have something so easy. Lucas shot me apologetic glances, but he never stepped in. I left that night feeling uneasy. It wasn't that she had outright insulted me, but the way she spoke made it clear she didn't respect me. Still, I told myself it wasn't worth making a big deal out of. Maybe she just had a sharp sense of humor. Maybe she needed time to warm up to me. So I let it slide. That was my first mistake. By the time Christmas rolled around, I had convinced myself that Bianca's attitude wasn't personal. Maybe she was just a difficult person in general. But that illusion shattered completely at the family Christmas party. The evening started off fine. I stuck close to Lucas, making conversation with his cousins and parents, trying to enjoy myself. Bianca was there with her boyfriend Ethan, and for a while, she barely acknowledged me. I thought that was a win. Then, out of nowhere, Bianca stood up, pointed at me and said, "I saw you flirting with Ethan." At first, I thought it was a joke, some ridiculous attempt at humor. But then she started crying, actual tears. "I can't believe you would do this in front of everyone," she sobbed, her voice rising with each word. The room fell silent for a second, and then laughter. Not at me, but at the situation, like it was some dramatic scene in a soap opera. Lucas looked horrified, but he didn't say anything. Bianca kept going, talking about how I had been too friendly with Ethan, how I was always looking for attention. Ethan, for his part, just sat there looking confused. I was stunned, completely blindsided. I had barely spoken to Ethan all night, aside from polite small talk, and yet here I was being accused of hitting on him in front of the entire family. I expected someone, Lucas, his parents, anyone, to step in and tell Bianca she was being ridiculous, but no one did. They brushed it off like it was just Bianca being Bianca. That night in the car ride home, I told Lucas how humiliating that had been. He agreed, but his response was weak. She was just being dramatic. She probably didn't mean it. That was the moment I realized something important. Bianca could do whatever she wanted, and no one in her family would ever hold her accountable. After the Christmas fiasco, I did my best to avoid Bianca. I wasn't rude, but I kept my distance, limiting interactions to the bare minimum. Lucas understood, or at least I thought he did. A few months later, Bianca's best friend, Olivia, was throwing a big birthday party. It was supposed to be a major event. Everyone in the family was invited. Lucas told me about it casually one evening, assuming I already knew, but I hadn't been invited. I remember the exact moment it hit me. "Wait, when did I get an invitation?" I asked. Lucas hesitated, checking his phone. "Oh," he muttered. "You didn't." "No, I didn't. And it wasn't a mistake." Bianca made sure of that. A few days later, Lucas confronted her. She shrugged and said, "Don't hate me, I'm just the messenger." Apparently, Olivia had made the guest list, but Bianca hadn't even tried to include me. Worse, she acted like she was doing Lucas a favor by delivering the news herself. It stung. Not because I particularly cared about the party, but because it was yet another reminder that I wasn't welcome. I had spent holidays with these people, made an effort to be part of the family, and still, Bianca saw me as an outsider. Lucas told me he felt bad but assured me it wasn't personal. "It's just how Bianca is," he repeated, as if that made it okay. But it was personal. And for the first time, I started to wonder if this was the kind of family I really wanted to marry into. The more time I spent around Bianca, the more I realized that her behavior wasn't just reserved for me. She was like this with everyone. The difference? Most people either tolerated it or ignored it. I saw it firsthand at a restaurant one evening when Lucas and I joined his family for dinner. Our server made a small mistake, bringing Bianca the wrong side dish. Instead of handling it like a normal person, she rolled her eyes, sighed dramatically, and said, "Wow, do I have to do your job for you?" She then pushed the plate toward the edge of the table like it was contaminated. The server apologized and fixed the mistake immediately, but Bianca wasn't done. She made snide comments under her breath every time he walked by, loudly questioning how someone so incompetent even got hired. By the end of the meal, she refused to tip, saying, "If I reward stupidity, how will people ever improve?" I felt sick. That was just one example, but there were countless others. She spread rumors about her own friends, casually insulted her co-workers, and bragged about manipulating people to get what she wanted. She treated kindness as weakness and cruelty as a sport. It wasn't just me. Bianca was simply a terrible person. Lucas saw it too, but he had spent his whole life normalizing her behavior. "She can be a lot," he admitted once, "but she's my sister." That was the excuse. That was the reason everyone let her get away with it. I, however, wasn't willing to play along. After everything Bianca had done, the insults, the accusations, the deliberate exclusion, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight with her. I wasn't going to demand an apology, and I certainly wasn't going to beg for acceptance. I was simply going to keep my distance. Lucas and I sat down one evening and I told him exactly how I felt. "I won't ask you to cut ties with her," I said, "but I don't want to be around her any more than necessary." To my relief, he agreed. "I get it," he said. "You don't have to force a relationship with her." That was all I needed. I could handle occasional encounters, holiday gatherings, big family events, but beyond that, I wouldn't go out of my way to engage with Bianca. It was the perfect compromise. For a while, things felt easier. Lucas would visit his family alone when needed, and I no longer felt obligated to endure Bianca's presence. It wasn't ideal, but it was peaceful. And after years of dealing with her, peace was all I really wanted. But peace never lasts when Bianca is involved. And as the wedding got closer, so did the pressure to change everything I had agreed to. As the wedding approached, I could feel the shift in Lucas's attitude. At first, he seemed content with our agreement. I wouldn't go out of my way to interact with Bianca, and he wouldn't push it. But then, little comments started slipping into our conversations. "She's still my sister," he reminded me one night, "and after we're married, you'll be part of the family too." I knew where this was going. A week later, he brought it up again, more directly this time. "I think it's time to move past all of this," he said. "Bianca is coming to the wedding. Can we at least try to make things less tense?" That was something I had already agreed to. Bianca could come. I wouldn't cause a scene. But Lucas wasn't talking about just tolerating her presence. He wanted me to interact with her, to act like everything was fine. I shook my head. I'm not going to pretend we have a relationship when we don't. Lucas sighed. It's one day. Can't you just be civil? I almost laughed. Civil? I had been nothing but civil since the moment I met Bianca. I had ignored insults, endured public humiliation, and tolerated her cruelty for years. And now, because it was inconvenient for him, I was supposed to erase all of that? But I loved Lucas. And I wanted our wedding day to be perfect, so I made a final compromise. I won't cause any drama, I promised. I'll be polite, I'll be cordial, but that's it. Lucas hesitated, but in the end, he nodded. Okay, he said, that's enough. Or so I thought. The wedding was set, the guest list finalized, and I had done my part. Bianca would be there, and I wouldn't start any conflict. That should have been the end of it. But for Lucas, it wasn't. One night, as we were discussing future plans, he casually mentioned an upcoming family dinner. It'll be good practice, he said. Practice for what? I asked, already sensing where this was going. For after we're married, he replied. You know, spending time with my family, with Bianca. I stared at him. We already agreed. I'll be civil at the wedding, but I'm not going out of my way to spend time with her. Lucas frowned. That was before. We're starting a life together. We can't keep avoiding family events just because you don't like my sister. I felt my stomach tighten. It's not that I don't like her, Lucas. She has treated me horribly for years. Why should I put myself in that situation? He sighed, rubbing his face. Because that's what family does. They work through things. No, I said firmly. That's what people do when there's mutual respect. Bianca doesn't respect me. She never has. Lucas looked at me for a long moment before shaking his head. I just don't want to live in a marriage where we have to constantly navigate around this. I exhaled slowly. Then don't ask me to put myself in a situation where I'm not wanted. I'm marrying you, not Bianca. His silence told me everything. This wasn't over. And the weight of his expectation hung heavy between us. The tension between Lucas and me was growing, and I could feel it in every conversation. He wasn't pushing outright, but the expectation was always there, lingering beneath his words. Every time he mentioned his family, I knew what he really meant. Bianca. One evening, after another exhausting discussion about the future, I decided I needed to be clear. No more compromises, no more dancing around the issue. I love you, I told Lucas, but I need you to understand something. I am not going to force a relationship with Bianca. I won't be cruel, I won't be dramatic, but I also won't pretend she's someone she's not. If you need me to be best friends with your sister, then I don't know what to tell you. Lucas looked at me, his jaw tight. It's not about being best friends. It's about being a family. No, Lucas, I said, my voice firm. Being a family means mutual effort. I have tried. She hasn't. And I refuse to spend the rest of my life walking into situations where I'm disrespected. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. So what? You'll just never come to family events? I'll come when I want to, when it's something important. But I will not sit through dinner after dinner, pretending everything is fine. The conversation ended with him shaking his head, muttering, I just don't get it. And maybe he never would. But for the first time, I wasn't worried about whether he understood. I was done justifying myself. With the wedding just weeks away, Lucas and I had reached an uneasy truce. He hadn't brought up Bianca again, but I could feel the tension whenever the subject of family came up. He wanted me to change my mind. I knew I wouldn't. Part of me wondered if this would always be a shadow over our marriage. Would Lucas keep expecting me to come around? Would he resent me for drawing this boundary? Would I eventually be seen as the problem instead of Bianca? I had stood my ground. I had been clear about my limits, and yet I couldn't shake the nagging thought, am I being unreasonable? I refuse to surround myself with people who make me feel unwelcome. I refuse to tolerate mistreatment just because it comes from family. I've made every compromise I can without betraying myself, but Lucas doesn't see it that way. To him, I'm creating unnecessary division. I'm refusing to be the bigger person. So now, I'm asking you, am I the asshole for standing my ground? Should I let the past go for the sake of family peace, or am I right to protect my own peace first?